Hello, everyone. My name is Gabby Plumet. I am with WorkTok. Today, we are going to kick off our first part in our summer mini series, and ultimately, it is going to be the ultimate employee experience. It is a six-part series, weekly on Tuesdays at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So let's go ahead and kick off employee turnover. Real quick, just a little bit about me. My name is Gabrielle Plumet. I am the product marketing specialist and people and culture consultant with our sister company, Leith HR Group. Leith HR Group and PS Solutions came together and created WorkTok, a HR tool for busy managers to make sure to prioritize their check-ins with their employees. I consider myself an employee retention advocate since I've been in this role for about a little over 2 years. I've done a lot of research, talked to a lot of clients and business partners, and trying to come up with ways to ultimately retain people. All right. So today we are going to dive into a few different things regarding employee turnover. First up, we are going to get into the root causes. We're going to touch on that because it's important to know what the foundation, why people quit in the first place, what may spark them to quit, what can we do to prevent them from quitting, all of the things. We'll talk about the root causes. Next up, we'll talk about calculating turnover. A lot of managers that we talk to have no idea how much they're actually spending on turnover. So this is going to be a great chance for you guys to learn the breakdown of the cost of turnover. We're going to get into the business risks from employee turnover. It can do a lot to a business. There is revenue loss and all kinds of good stuff that we'll get into. And then lastly, we'll go over a few different retention strategies that you can ultimately start doing today after this. Low cost and things that use a little more effort, all of which we recommend, and we will dive into that here shortly. So first up, let's talk about how much U.S. businesses are currently spending on voluntary turnover. This is according to a study performed by Gallup in 2022. Any idea how much money we're spending on turnover? Ultimately, like I mentioned, a lot of managers that I talk to, they have no idea. They know, hey, I know that we have a chance for some improvement here, that we're losing all this money, not necessarily sure how much or what the breakdown is per employee, but they know it's a lot of money. And you know what? They're right. It is a lot of money. $1 trillion was spent in 2022 by businesses on voluntary turnover. That is a lot of money. And 52% of voluntary turnover or exiting, employees say their manager or organization could have done something to prevent them from leaving their job. 52%, over half of those included in this survey said that their managers could have done something. That is enough for me to say, hey, we got to do something, right? And just to break it down by industry, so the average for all industries, the turnover rate is about 10.6%. And then to go specifically into a few different types, professional services, so think IT, business consultants, accounting, finance, anything like that, they have a 13.4 turnover rate. Tech and media, 12.9% turnover rate. Hospitality, 11.8%, and retail, 11.4%. So, and again, the average for all industries is right around that 10.5%. So why do we mention this, and why do we talk about this? It's a lot of money, and a lot of it could be prevented, right? So I think that there's a big opportunity here for managers and business owners to really look into their numbers, their employees, and see what the root causes are and where they can help. So with that, let's talk about the root causes. So first up, we have lack of growth and progression. This is one of the main factors affecting turnover. According to a report from Gallup, 87% of millennials shared that opportunities for growth and development are one of the most important factors of career satisfaction. And roughly 70% of professionals in other generations echoed the same thing. So, we always hear, oh, the boomers and older generations, they only cared about the career growth, and they want to be with the career for 10 plus years. yada, yada, yada. No, it's essentially the same for the younger generations. They might not know, first off, hey, I want to be with this particular job for, or this particular, job for, 10 years from now. But they definitely want to grow, and that's how you keep them. Maybe they don't want to be in the particular the job, but they have interest elsewhere and they want to grow laterally or up the ladder in itself. That is where you make that happen, right? Human beings crave progression and aim for continuous professional improvement. Employees who stop learning, growing, and setting higher goals grow bored, restless, anxious, and are more likely to start seeking new opportunities elsewhere. We'll go into how we fix this later in one of our retention strategies. So we'll put a pin in that. The next step that we have is no innovation. So many employees long to contribute to society, solve complex problems, and affect change. When companies fail to innovate and evolve, bright employees feel stagnant. And that's not what we want to do, right? We want to make sure that our employees that are hungry and willing to learn and they have all these ideas in their brain, we want to make sure that they have a place where they can feel valued, their ideas are welcomed, all of that good stuff, so they don't take those great ideas elsewhere. Which would bring us to top talent might leave an organization for a chance to engineer a new product, found a new company, or launch a new service. So not to mention, if a company fails to innovate, then employees may wonder about future job security, as companies who fail to evolve rarely continue to dominate the market. So that's just something to think about when you're thinking about your business. Next up, inefficient management, aka poor management. We all have heard the saying, employees don't leave companies, they leave managers. And this is, according to the data, the hard data, this stands so true. According to an employee retention report from Tiny Pulse, employees who rate supervisor performance as subpar are 4 times more likely to look for a new job. Now, that's super important because it all stems with something that you can change. You can provide your management with great training. You can make sure that the right people are in these management positions. And we'll get into that a little later as well. But just some things to remember. Management is key here, right? Next on our list, absence of camaraderie. This is big. Social ties are very important when a sense of belonging and community exists in a workplace. Teammates feel responsibility towards coworkers, right? So the commitment to colleagues inspires a sense of commitment to the company and to the job. Conversely, when coworkers feel more like strangers than collaborators and friends, then professionals have much less to think about when seeking new opportunities. So basically, if a bunch of your friends are working under, your colleagues are your friends, you're more inclined to stay than to look for a new job because you're working with the people that you like, right? So that's super important and a big part of turnover in the last couple of years that HR professionals and the data showing and everything like that is definitely showing this sense of belongingness. And that gets a little tough when you have virtual teams. So being able to create that camaraderie across the virtual boundaries is super, super important as well. Next, we have lack of recognition and appreciation. Organizations that praise workers send the message that their hard work is meaningful and it doesn't go unnoticed. This is super, super important. Positive feedback reassures the staff that individual efforts contribute towards larger goals, making the job more meaningful and enjoyable. And this does not have to be this whole thing. It sure enough can be, and I think your employees deserve big praises when it's due. But even going as far as saying thank you, oh my gosh, great job on the project, oh, I know you worked very, very hard, why don't you leave early on Friday, things like that can really go a long way for your employees. Next on our list, overworked. A recent Deloitte survey uncovered that 77% of respondents experienced burnout at their current job, and 42% of those respondents had left the position for this exact reason. Even more specifically, 84% of millennials self-reported burnout. Now, this is a word, burnout is a word that we've heard over the last few years, but it is a thing. You reach to the point where you're like, man, I'm just so tired. I'm doing the same thing every single day. And as an employer, we need to think, how can we reduce the burnout? Is it because we have understaffed? That we got too many things in the air right now. Do we need to prioritize? Is there anything off of our employees that we could take off their plate onto ours? Things like that. How can we support is ultimately the key there. And then lastly on this list, we have underpaying. So we got to make sure that we are paying our employees a fair wage. Otherwise, they're going to go to the competitor for, a 10K increase. Although money is not everything, the grass is not always greener on the other side. Money is a big part. Initially, it'll get your employees thinking if you're not competitive. In our HR space, we would recommend that you are performing a compensation benchmark annually just to make sure that you're staying competitive in the region that your business is located and where your employees are living. So that way, they can feel good about their pay, and that's something that you don't even have to worry about, right? So next up, let's get into the breakdown of the cost of turnover. So first up is the time, right? So outside of the straight up cost is time. Time is money. We've heard that before, and it reigns true, right? So it's going to take you on average about 6 to 9 months to find and train your next hire, right? It's going to take some time, especially it depends on the talent market. It depends on, who do you have in place to run the search? Who do you have in place to do these interviews? Your hiring managers, do they have a free schedule, right? So it all depends on if they have the time and the resources to even find these people. Additionally, it's going to take, once you hire that person, it's going to take probably a year to 2 years for that new employee to reach the same productivity level that the employee who had quit. So time is money. This is all going into one candidate, right? So it's going to take you 6 to 9 months to find more candidates. So that's just something to think about. Next up, let's get into the actual costs. So it is around 33% on average of your employee's salary is the cost of turnover. So, and that's raised in the last couple of years because of everything that goes into it and the time. Hourly employees, turnover can cost up to $4,500, which is a lot of money for, your frontline people. Think restaurants, services like that. And then it can range all the way up to more than twice your C-level suite salary. So if you have a C-level person, executive leader quit, it might cost up to twice their salary to replace them. And that's taking in the time, the resources, and all of the training and all of that good stuff that goes into turnover. Last up, let's talk about some of the resources. The cost comes, there's a cost whenever you're using new resources, and you're going to have resources that cover the missing labor capacity. There's going to be pressure on understaffed teams and hopes that they're not going to also quit because they are also stressed. So we got to think about that because that will just get you in a cycle that you don't want to be in. All right, let's talk about the business risks of turnover. So first up, let's talk about how, turnover creates very low team morale. So it's tough for employees to constantly see their colleagues move on in this, revolving door. If you have new people constantly adding to the team and people leaving, and your most senior person on the team has been there for 3 months, and so it's kind of, they don't really know how to train yet. It could really lower your team morale. It could affect the team as staff they don't see the point in building productive relationships if they're unlikely to last, right? So that's something that we need to think about. You don't want it to be a revolving door. You want to definitely add people to your team, which is great, but it would be really, really great to continue to add while people being there. Next up, bad reputation. So that means, your business will be less likely to attract future employees, right? Employers are not the only ones doing research on candidates now. Candidates are doing deep dives into your company profiles, the people in your roles that you have, the hiring team, the CEO or president of your company. They are getting on LinkedIn and they are doing their research. They're getting on Instagram, they're doing their research. So being able to have a reputation online and just in the community that you don't have high turnover, that is key. because you want to have a pipeline of talent there and that's eager to be a part of your team. So that's just something to think about. Next up, loss of customers. So returning customers build relationships with employees as well as the business. That's just something that you got to remember. If you have a high performing employee and they have deep relationships with, 20 account holders, that's something to think about. If they were to turn over, will those account holders still be there? So really, your customers are going to feel how you treat your employees. If you treat your employees right and they're super happy, your customers are going to know. If you don't treat your employees great, your customers are going to know. So you really got to think about that. Then lastly, another business risk, the cost. We've talked about this, $1 trillion on average. Businesses are spending probably anywhere from 25,000 to about 100,000 a year on turnover, and that's just small to mid-sized businesses. So imagine what you could do with that money that you would save. $100,000 could probably take your team out to a weekend retreat, or maybe a nice dinner, or throw a little gala, or put it into employee benefits, give employees bonuses, all of those things that you would rather do with $100,000 than to push it out the door, right? So we don't want to do that, and it's really, really important to remember the cost. And also, let's go back to this tool on our website. So if you go to WorkTok.com and you scroll down, there is a turnover calculator that you can use. Basically, you just put in your how many employees that you have, the average salary, and then how many people, either percentage or how many actual people that you have that have left your company. It'll work those numbers in with that 33% on average, and it'll spit out a number, and it'll show you exactly how much money that you've been spending on turnover. So that's on worktalk.com. Check that out. It's a great tool for you to use. All right. And then let's get moving on to the retention strategies. So just a brief level, high level kind of overview of, we have 8 here, but there's some others out there. And we actually have 8 low cost ways to reward your employees, which we'll get into a little bit here, but that's on worktalk.com as well under our insights. We have a lot of great information on our site, so make sure you check that out. But for these retention strategies, let's get into it. So first up, we have create a culture that employees want to be a part of. So this means creating that foundation that your employees want to be there. They want to show up as their full selves. They feel complete. They feel whole. They want to hang out with their coworkers. They want to stay after for the happy hour, or they want to stay and show up to your summer camp grill out day afternoon, right? You don't want to be pulling teeth trying to get people to show up into office. So really creating that culture that employees are welcomed, they're here, they're going to have a great time. And you know what? It starts with the leaders, right? If management's never in office, why would the employees be in office? If they're like, hey, I don't see you guys there, they're not going to show up. So making sure that you have that environment is really, really key. Next up, we have recognize and reward your employees. So this does not take much time. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of low-cost ways to show your appreciation. And it's important to remember that Gen Z wants to know that they're doing a good job all the time. They want to know how they're doing, feedback. They want regular feedback. They're doing a good job. That's what's going to keep them motivated out of the generations, Gen Z especially. You could do things like a video thank you, a team outing, a luncheon, thank you notes, extra time off. If, like I mentioned earlier, if they've completed a project and you have nothing going on that Friday afternoon, let them go. Let them have the afternoon with their family or their kid, especially if it's summertime. That will go a long way. Actions speak louder than words. This is especially true at work. Employees, they really, really want that loyalty piece from their management and leaders. If you are constantly getting feedback and doing nothing with it, or promising this, and this, you should do this, and this. That's going to be the number one thing to break the trust that they have with you, is if you promise something and you don't do it, or you push it off, or it's not important, things like that. You want to make sure that it's actionable feedback, see how you can help, and put in an action plan and stick to that plan. Super important for retention. Train your management team. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but there's a ton of trainings out there. Empathy is one of the number one skills that good managers have. There's hard data on that, and it runs true with all the good managers that I've talked to. Empathy is definitely number one. To be able to understand, to be able to support, and to be able to lead, you got to have empathy. So, and plus, everybody could use a good reminder of, what language to use, what tone to use, things like that. Everybody could use a good reminder. All right, next up we have retention bonus. So there's a couple different things that I've heard that's worked for some of our clients and business partners. So there's a option where you could do like a bonus now at 5K, as your annual bonus. If you do that, you could get your bonus now or stay for 3 years and get $25,000 as like a retention. You've been here for 3 years, you pocket the 5, and it, times by 5 in 3 years, which not a bad gig, not a bad option. The other option would be like an employee retention bonus. So with a little bit hint of referral, which I think is a fantastic idea. If you have an employee, an all-star employee, they referred a friend. Not only are they going to be happy because they're working with a friend, and their friend's going to be happy because they're working with a friend. But if you could offer them $100, $200, if that friend stays 6 months, that's a great way to help build out your talent pipeline for trusting employees, and that's ultimately going to make your employee base happier because they're working with their friends. So super important, super cool opportunity if you have the means. Next up, improve your onboarding process. So a Gallup study shows that 20% of turnover happens in the first 45 days. Ultimately, onboarding is the first impression of your company outside of the interview process. So you really want to make sure those two processes are in tip-top shape, right? Your goal should be to have your employee go home and say, this is the best onboarding experience that I've ever had. That should be the number one goal. And if you have that, you're less likely to have turnover. Provide wellness offerings. So this could range anywhere from, health benefits, mental health resources, subscriptions like the Calm app. That's a really great one. You could do wellness workshops, food planning, meal prep, have somebody in the community come in and teach your employees how to meal prep if they're interested, or how to cook if they're interested. Yoga, I've seen that be very popular with some of our clients. Take an hour once a week or once a month to bring in a yoga instructor and lead the group through a practice, either before work, during work. I would recommend, if you have an afternoon that's kind of slow, put it in there. Everybody's going to be in office anyway. That's a great way to, show your team that you care. And also there's been a lot of wellness workshops of like stretching at your desk, mindfulness of, breaking your day up into blocks and then going for a walk. Walking meetings is another big thing that is very popular. If you have the means, take a walk around the building instead of, the virtual or in person, and just wait and see how many new ideas that you have flowing, because studies show if you have some physical movement, you're also going to have a better thinking process. So keep that in mind next time you have a meeting. And then lastly, and probably the most important, regular two-way communication, stay interviews. So how are you going to know what's going to keep your employees to stay if you don't talk to them? This is super important. That way you can really tailor your strategies to specifically your people. The wellness offerings might not work for, a retail place over a construction place or vice versa. But that's where you have those open communication, conversations, and get to know your employees, what works for them, what they want. And that way, the effort that you're putting in, you'll know that you're doing a good job and trying to hone in on your target and your goal. And it'll, your employees are going to feel valued, heard, and just overall thankful that their manager or business owner, their leaders are asking, and they're, really tailoring their strategies to them. So ultimately, you really want to improve that employee communications. That is how you're going to plug that $1 million leak in your company. Train your managers to have frequent, meaningful conversations with employees about what really matters to them. what's frustrating them, how can you support them better, what are their dreams, where do they want to go, all of that good stuff. Get to know your people. If they take PTO and they return back, ask them about their vacation. Did they go somewhere fun? If they have a child and they're, Fridays they leave a little early to go pick Sarah up for volleyball camp or, practice. Ask a little bit about that. Ask about Sarah. Ask about her volleyball. Get to know people at a human level. We're wired to connect and we're wired to build relationships. And if we bring that a little bit more into the workplace, that's how we're going to be super successful as managers and business owners. And with that, we are going to wrap up. Thank you so much for tuning in for our employee turnover part 1 of our 6-part series. Next up, we are going to talk about understanding the importance of employee feedback. We're going to dive into employee surveys, one-on-one meetings, focus groups, actionable feedback, and how to respond. I'm going to give you some really, really great tools to use. A lot of managers are like, okay, I got the feedback. Now what? How do I respond? So we'll dive into that. It's going to be a really great part. And with that, I look forward to being in touch with all of you. If you would like to contact us, please reach out, www.worktalk.com, contact@worktalk.com if you want to email us. And then you can find us on all of our socials, WorkTalk _app. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all of the things. Check us out. There's some really, really great resources out there. And then if you'd like to get a free demo to see how to use WorkTalk, how you can start improving your employee communications today for $3.99 per person per month. So it's cheap, it's affordable, it is simple. Reach out, contact@worktalk.com. We'd love to show you a free demo. Thanks so much for tuning in.